Everyone thought it would be an ordinary trial, a simple testimony from a quiet little girl who claimed she had witnessed a crime. The courtroom was full, but not tense, more curious than anything. After all, how often do you see a child sitting in a witness stand with a German Shepherd police dog beside her? She walked in, small, fragile, almost too polite. And when she spoke, her voice was soft, but steady. People began whispering about how brave she was, how composed, how mature for her age. But then, something happened that no one expected. The dog, Rex, lifted his head, stared at her, then growled, low and troubled. Not at the defendant, not at the judge, at her. That single sound changed everything. The courtroom froze. The judge leaned forward, and in the silence that followed, a truth began to unravel, one that no one in that room was prepared to hear. By the end of this story, you'll understand why a simple head pat from a scared little girl brought an entire trial to a halt, and revealed a secret buried beneath fear, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a child and a dog whose heart could not be fooled. The courtroom felt colder than usual that morning, an echoing chamber of polished wood, stiff-backed benches, and fluorescent lights that hummed just loudly enough to remind everyone that justice, here, was a machine. Impersonal, unforgiving. The kind of place where truth was measured in testimonies, documents, and emotionless procedure. And yet, for the first time in months, every seat was filled. Officers lined the back wall. Reporters scribbled in notebooks despite the ban on cameras. And townspeople who normally had no interest in legal affairs sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering behind their hands. Because today's case wasn't ordinary. It involved a child, a crime, and a mystery no one fully understood. Not yet. Everyone believed they already knew what happened. They had read the reports, heard the rumors, seen the headlines. Young witness to testify in kidnapping case. Brave girl to help convict dangerous suspect. But the truth, like a frightened animal, was hiding somewhere none of them could see. Then, the side door opened. A hush fell across the courtroom as the girl entered. She was small, shockingly small, for someone expected to testify in such a serious case. Her shoulders curled inward, as though trying to fold herself out of existence. She clutched her elbows, holding her own arms tightly across her fragile frame, each step hesitant, whisper-light, almost apologetic. Her shoes were too big, her sleeves too long, her hair neatly brushed, yet missing the carefree bounce of a child who slept peacefully. Her eyes, wide, downturned, scanned the room without lifting her chin. She didn't walk like someone who wanted to be there. She walked like someone who had to be. Rex saw her before most humans did. The German Shepherd, stationed near the witness stand, lifted his head sharply the moment she stepped into view. He wasn't just any police dog. Rex was the department's most trusted K9 for trauma detection and victim support. He could recognize fear the way others recognized color. Yet what he sensed from the girl wasn't simple fear. It was something deeper, something fractured. His handler noticed instantly. "Easy, boy," Officer Daniels whispered, though his own posture stiffened. Rex rarely reacted so strongly, especially toward a child, but the dog's ears were rigid, his tail low, his gaze locked. As the girl moved toward the stand, officers exchanged uneasy glances. Something about her entrance felt wrong. No one could name it, but everyone felt it. Judge Hawthorne entered next, robes flowing behind him like a dark curtain. He was old, wise, sharp-eyed, a man who had spent decades seeing past lies, half-truths, and confusion. He took his seat, scanned the room, and his gaze softened only when it landed on the girl. "Let us begin," he said, firm, yet unexpectedly gentle. "We are here regarding the kidnapping incident on May 14th. The young witness has been called to provide her account." Witness. A harmless word. A neutral role. No one imagined she could be anything else. The girl lowered herself into the witness chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The microphone loomed too large before her, like a tower she feared to speak into. "What is your name, child?" the judge asked. She lifted her chin slightly. "Emily," she said. Her voice was steady, remarkably steady, too controlled, too polished, as if rehearsed. A few audience members exchanged impressed smiles. What a brave child, so calm, so composed. But Rex took one step closer. Not much, just enough for his handler to tense, tightening the leash. Emily answered each question gently, politely, like a student reciting memorized lines. Where she had been that night, what she had seen, how she supposedly escaped the danger others had not. Every word precise, every detail too neat, every sentence coated with an adult-like perfection. But her hands, those tiny, pale hands, twitched in her lap. Not enough for most eyes. But Rex noticed. He always did. He inched forward, sniffing the air around her. Not aggressively, but deeply, curiously, searching for something hidden beneath the surface. When his cold nose brushed her shoe, Emily stiffened. Her breath hitched. And in that moment, for the first time, the facade cracked. Not visibly, not loudly, but with a tremor too small for the human eye. Rex caught it. His ears flattened. His chest swelled with a slow, warning breath. "Rex, heel," Daniels whispered. But Rex did not step back. He stepped closer. Judge Hawthorne paused mid-question. "Is something wrong with the dog?" Before Daniels could answer, Emily's smooth, practiced voice faltered. Just one syllable, rougher than the rest. Rex's muscles tensed, and then it happened. A sound, low, soft, but unmistakably a growl, rumbled from Rex's throat. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hostile, Paul. But it rippled through the courtroom like a shockwave. The stenographer froze. The prosecutor looked up sharply. Reporters lifted their heads with predatory instinct. Emily gasped, not in fear of Rex, but as though someone had finally heard the truth she had been trying desperately not to say. "Officer," the judge demanded, leaning forward, "control that dog." But Daniels shook his head, face pale. "Your Honor, Rex doesn't growl at victims or children. Something's off." Murmurs spread through the courtroom like wildfire. Emily swallowed hard. Rex growled again, quieter this time, but with purpose. His gaze locked on Emily's trembling hands, as though pointing the humans toward the truth hidden beneath her silence. Judge Hawthorne's expression shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. Because for the first time since the trial began, someone in the room understood that they did not know the whole story at all. Everything they believed, everything they thought they understood, was only the surface. Beneath it, something darker waited to be uncovered. And Rex, the dog who never lied, was the first to sense it. For a long, fragile moment, the courtroom remained suspended in confusion, as if Rex's low growl had frozen time itself. No one breathed. No one spoke. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim beneath the tension crackling through the air. Emily sat rigid in the witness chair, her eyes shimmering with something no one could name. Not fear, not shock. Something quieter, deeper, like a memory she was trying desperately to bury beneath her steady voice. Judge Hawthorne leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on her. "Child, are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded quickly, too quickly. Her practiced politeness returned, but her fingers, those small, pale fingers, twitched and squeezed together until her knuckles turned white. Her breath trembled, even though her voice didn't. Rex saw it. Rex always saw it. The German shepherd's body was tense, but he didn't bark or pull or resist. Instead, he stood rooted beside her, watching her with a focus so sharp it almost seemed human. His handler could feel the tremor traveling through the leash. Subtle, but present. "Rex," Officer Daniels whispered again, tugging lightly. But the dog didn't step back. He didn't move at all. Emily's gaze drifted downward, not toward Rex's face, but toward the space near her feet, like she sensed his presence before she even thought of looking at him. Her breathing hitched, only for a second, and she blinked as if trying to push away an invisible tide rising inside her. Then, without thinking, without even seeming aware of it, Emily reached out her hand. It wasn't a bold movement. It wasn't deliberate. Time 500 mouse. It was instinctual, soft, automatic, almost like a child reaching for something familiar in the dark. Her fingertips grazed Rex's head. A collective gasp didn't erupt, but the energy in the room shifted. Subtle, electric. Some people softened, assuming the child simply needed comfort. Others watched curiously, but very few truly saw what that touch meant. Because Emily didn't pet him like a child petting a dog. She touched him like someone clinging to the last safe thing in an unsafe world. Her hand trembled the moment it made contact. So lightly, she almost lifted it away again. But then Rex lifted his head, meeting her touch halfway, and the smallest sound escaped her. A thin breath, barely audible but filled with relief so raw it hurt to hear. It was tender, heartbreaking, the kind of moment that, if blinked at, would be missed entirely. Rex froze under her hand, not in fear, not in discomfort, but in recognition. Something in the girl's trembling touch spoke to him, a familiar scent, a deeper pulse of pain, an echo of something he had felt before in other victims. Fear hidden so deep that even the bravest eyes couldn't hide it. Then, slowly, quietly, Rex leaned into her hand. Gasps broke out from two officers near the back, their brows furrowing. Rex wasn't a dog who leaned into strangers, especially not in the middle of testimony, but he pressed his head against her palm with a gentle insistence, as if trying to anchor her, as if telling her he understood something even she couldn't say out loud. Emily's fingers curled into his fur, and her other hand moved instinctively to steady herself on the edge of the witness stand. Her sleeve slipped slightly. Judge Hawthorne noticed the first flicker of suspicion sparking in his eyes. But he didn't interrupt yet. He watched. Because in the quiet, in the fragile space between dog and child, something unspoken passed, something profound, something that wasn't supposed to happen in a courtroom designed for logic and facts. Emily wasn't petting Rex. She was holding on to him. Her head dipped just slightly as she whispered a shaky breath. A tear didn't fall. She wasn't crying, but the shine of moisture gathering beneath her lashes betrayed the truth her voice had been hiding. Rex shifted. Slowly, purposefully, he circled once and lowered himself beside her chair, positioning his body between Emily and everyone else. Defense, prosecution, spectators, even the judge. A silent barrier, a shield, a wordless protest. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't threatening. But every trained officer in the room recognized the posture immediately. Rex was protecting her, not the witness, not the child assigned to testify. Her, the real her. Officer Daniels whispered sharply, "Rex, no, sit back." But the dog stayed rooted beside Emily, refusing to move from her side. His shoulder brushed her leg, and she exhaled a shaky breath that trembled too much to hide. Judge Hawthorne's sharp eyes caught everything. The girl's rigid posture softening under Rex's presence, the tremble running through her fingers, the way she leaned ever so slightly toward the dog, as if his nearness soothed an ache she didn't know how to name. He narrowed his gaze. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. "Is the child comfortable?" the prosecutor asked, trying to regain control. Emily nodded, but her voice cracked on the word. "Yes." Rex lifted his head sharply at the crack. The courtroom stilled again. Judge Hawthorne folded his hands, studying the girl with a scrutiny far more penetrating than before. His instincts, honed over decades of lies, confessions, and hidden truths, whispered urgently that something in this testimony was not what it seemed. The small hand resting on Rex's fur shook. Barely, but enough. Her breath wavered, her posture wilted, and her fingers tightened in his coat as if afraid he might leave. Rex didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply stayed beside her, chest rising slowly, protectively, as if forming a wall between her and whatever invisible fear was crawling up her spine. The judge's brows pulled together, deeper this time. Details that seemed insignificant minutes earlier malformed a pattern. Her too perfect voice, her rigid control, her forced calm. Now this. Now her trembling. Now the dog's reaction. The courtroom faded into a distant, muffled hum as Judge Hawthorne leaned forward and whispered to himself, barely audible, "What happened to you, child?" He didn't ask her aloud. Not yet. Because in that moment, the final moment before everything would begin to unravel, the only thing that mattered was the image before him. A trembling hand resting on Rex's fur, the dog sitting protectively beside her, and a judge beginning to see the first cracks in a carefully constructed lie. Fade out. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Emily's hand still rested on Rex's fur, trembling ever so slightly, and the dog stayed pressed against her leg, like a guardian carved from muscle and loyalty. The energy in the courtroom had shifted. Quiet, heavy, aware. Even those who hadn't noticed the subtle tension before now sensed something fragile was unraveling at the edges. Judge Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Let us continue," he said carefully, though a subtle strain pushed beneath his words. He shuffled a few papers, but his eyes never left the girl. "Miss Emily, can you tell the court again?" Where were you when the incident occurred? A simple question, one she had already answered twice. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her lips parted, barely moving. Her throat tightened visibly. Her breath caught on something invisible, like a hand gripping her from within. "Miss Emily?" the prosecutor prompted gently. But still, she couldn't speak. Not a word. Not even a whisper. Her eyes darted left, then right, searching the room for something. Someone who wasn't there. Her fingers curled into Rex's fur, desperate, almost hurting him. Rex lifted his head. Sensing her distress, he nudged her leg with his nose, gentle, deliberate, a reminder, a comfort, a plea for honesty. Emily flinched at the touch, as though the dog's small gesture struck a nerve she had been trying desperately to keep hidden. Judge Hawthorne noticed everything. He leaned forward. "Miss Emily, are you struggling to answer?" She shook her head quickly, a reflexive denial, but her eyes betrayed her. Wet, glassy, shimmering with fear. The courtroom held its breath. The stenographer paused, typing. The prosecutor frowned. A reporter dropped his pen but didn't dare reach for it. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Judge Hawthorne's voice softened. Not accusatory, but instinctive, protective. "Child, look at me." Emily slowly lifted her gaze. Those wide, frightened eyes met the judge's, and something in them, buried deep, made his heart seize. He had seen that look before. Not from liars, not from actors, but from victims. Suddenly, the polished calm she had shown, the perfect testimony, the steady voice, it all seemed wrong. Too mature, too composed, too rehearsed. Something cold cracked open in his chest. "Miss Emily," he said, each word firmer than the last. "Is someone pressuring you to say something that isn't true?" Her breath shattered on a tiny gasp. Rex's ears shot up. The girl's shoulders curled inward, shrinking, folding, as though someone had spoken the one sentence she feared most. Judge Hawthorne's intuition screamed, loud, unmistakable. He stood. "Child," he said, stepping down from the bench, voice trembling ever so slightly. "Show me your hand." The courtroom erupted in whispers. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, but the judge snapped, "Silence!" His robes swayed as he approached, slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any moment. Emily's eyes went wide. She shook her head, pulling her sleeve tighter around her wrist. "Emily," he said gently, "show me your hand." Her lower lip quivered. Rex pressed closer, warm and solid beside her, as if telling her, "You're not alone anymore." The judge reached the edge of the witness stand, stopping just short of her. He didn't touch her. He didn't pressure her. He simply waited. Firm. Compassionate. The room was so quiet. Even the hum of the lights disappeared. Finally, with a trembling breath, Emily reached for her sleeve. Her fingers shook. She hesitated. Then, slowly, painfully slowly, she pushed the fabric upward. First an inch, then another. The crowd leaned forward, and then they saw it. The faint scar, thin, pale, unmistakably shaped like the burn of a rope, stretched across her delicate wrist. It was small, but it was enough. A collective gasp tore through the courtroom. Someone whispered, "Dear God." The prosecutor's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the floor. A defense attorney muttered a curse, stepping backward in shock. Emily jerked her arm back, trying to hide the scar again. She looked terrified, not of the people, not of being caught, but of being seen. Because now her secret wasn't hidden anymore. Rex whimpered softly. Breaking every rule he had been trained to follow, Rex pressed his body firmly against her leg, placing his head beneath her trembling hand and nudging upward, urging her to keep it lifted, to not hide anymore. Her breath hitched again. Tears welled. But she didn't look at the judge. She looked at Rex. As if the dog's steady presence, warm, real, loyal, was the only thing keeping her upright. Judge Hawthorne swallowed hard. He straightened slowly, trembling with anger, confusion, heartbreak, because he knew. He knew exactly what he was seeing, knew exactly what that scar meant. His voice, when it finally emerged, was barely more than a whisper. "You're not a witness, are you?" The room erupted. Shocked whispers, panic, disbelief. But Emily didn't move. She stared at her lap, eyes overflowing but silent, her fingers knotted into Rex's fur like a lifeline. And Rex stayed perfectly still, protective, unmoving, refusing to let her break alone. The truth, the real truth, had just stepped into the light. And nothing in that courtroom would ever be the same again. For one suspended moment, the courtroom seemed to forget how to breathe. Emily sat frozen on the witness stand, the sleeve of her shirt slipping back down to cover the faint rope-burn scar. But the truth was already out. It hung in the air like a ghost, filling every corner of the chamber with a cold, heavy realization. She wasn't a witness. She had never been a witness. She was the child they were supposed to protect. Judge Hawthorne still stood beside her, his expression shattered between fury and heartbreak. He had seen many things in his decades on the bench, liars, criminals, victims too scared to speak, but nothing struck him the way this child did now. "Emily," he said softly, gently, cautiously, as one would speak to a bird balanced on the edge of a fragile branch. "Child, please, look at me." She shook her head violently, curls bouncing with the sudden motion. Her hands retreated to her lap, gripping each other so tightly her knuckles turned white. She squeezed her eyes shut, as if refusing the world in front of her, as if by not seeing it, she could make it disappear. Her breath came in sharp, tiny gasps, like a frightened animal cornered without escape. The people in the room, lawyers, officers, reporters, sat in stunned silence. No more whispers, no more murmurs, just a swelling, collective ache for the child trembling in plain sight. Rex sensed it first. The German shepherd had not taken his eyes off her. His body remained pressed against her leg, a warm, steadying presence. Now, sensing the violent tremor moving through her, he leaned forward and gently placed his paw on her foot. A simple gesture, soft, instinctive. But in its simplicity, it was profoundly human. Emily gasped, sharp, broken, because something about that touch, that tiny moment of something, reaching for her without demand or anger or expectation. It shattered her. Her shoulders jerked once, her chin quivered, her throat collapsed around a sound she fought to keep trapped inside. But it was too late. The dam broke. With a strangled cry, Emily collapsed forward, falling from the stiff wooden witness chair and into Rex's waiting chest. She buried her face in his neck, small fingers clutching desperately at his fur, as if he were the only thing keeping her from drowning. And then she sobbed. Not a whimper, not a trembling sniffle. A full, unrestrained, heart-wrenching cry that burst out of her tiny body with years of pain behind it. The kind of cry that didn't belong to an 8-year-old girl. The kind of cry that belonged to someone who had carried too much for far too long. Her wail echoed across the courtroom walls, ricocheting off the wood panels and landing in the hearts of every adult present. The sound was raw, primal, desperate, like the spirit inside her had finally had enough of being silent. This was the fourth climax, the moment her years of forced silence shattered. Rex didn't move. He didn't bark. He didn't shift away. He didn't even flick his tail. He simply let her sob into him, pressing closer, lowering his head to hers, letting her tears soak into his fur. It was as if his entire being absorbed her pain, giving her permission to release every fear she had held inside. Even the defense attorney, known for his cold demeanor and ruthless strategies, looked away, jaw clenched, unable to watch without emotion. The prosecutor wiped under his eye discreetly. The stenographer's hands hovered above the keys, shaking too much to type. The officers at the back stood rigid, their expressions drawn and heavy with regret. How had they missed her? How had they believed the reports? How had they not seen the suffering beneath her too perfect answers? Emily sobbed harder, her voice muffled in Rex's fur. Words tumbled out between gasps, broken, fragmented, aching. I didn't want to lie. Rex gently nudged her cheek with his nose, encouraging her to continue if she needed to. She clutched him tighter, shaking violently as the truth tore through her lips. They made me. A silence followed, sharp, deadly, echoing. No one in the room moved. No one dared breathe. Because now the truth wasn't a suspicion. It wasn't a theory. It wasn't a possibility. It was spoken, spilled, raw and real. Emily had been forced to lie, forced to pretend, forced into the role of witness when she had been the one tied, hurt, silenced. Judge Hawthorne's lips parted, but no sound emerged. His eyes glistened behind their stern resolve. He looked at her the way a father might look upon a child who had endured unimaginable pain. He stepped forward, placing a trembling hand on the railing of the witness stand, not touching her, but anchoring himself close enough to show he wasn't abandoning her. Not now, not ever. Bailiff, he managed, voice thick, strained. Clear the courtroom. No one questioned him. The order was not procedural. It was protective, instinctive, visceral. Reporters grabbed their notepads in stunned silence. Lawyers exchanged looks of defeat. Officers filed out slowly, eyes lowered in respect as they passed the sobbing child. The courtroom emptied around Emily and Rex, leaving only a small circle of people who had earned the right to remain. Judge Hawthorne, Officer Daniels, 2 detectives, and the court clerk who wiped her eyes repeatedly but refused to step outside. Rex still hadn't moved. He could have been carved from stone, still, steady, unshakable, except for the soft, rhythmic nudge of his snout against Emily's cheek each time she gasped to breathe. Her sobs gradually softened, not because she felt better, but because her small body simply ran out of strength to cry. Judge Hawthorne swallowed hard. Then, in a voice that shook with the weight of everything they had just witnessed, he said, This court is in recess. His gavel didn't slam. He didn't need it to. His voice alone carried enough tremor to echo all the heartbreak that had just unfolded. The courtroom door closed softly behind the last departing officer, leaving the chamber hollow, echoing with a silence so deep it seemed to breathe. Emily's sobs had quieted, her tiny body curled around Rex, as though he were the last safe corner in a collapsing world. Judge Hawthorne stood frozen, staring at the pair with a mixture of guilt, protectiveness, and dawning horror. But Rex remained unshakably calm. It was as if he had been preparing for this moment his entire life, and in a way, he had. The scene faded, and memory washed over like a warm, golden tide, a flashback drawn from the depths of Rex's past. The training grounds stretched across acres of open land, rolling fields, scent trails, obstacle courses, and the low hum of officers calling commands in the crisp morning air. But among all the dogs in training, one stood out. Rex, a young German shepherd with alert eyes and an uncanny stillness for his age. Even then, he possessed something different, something deeper, than the other eager pups tugging on their leashes. Officer Daniels remembered the first day he met him. "This one watches everything," the trainer said, gently patting Rex's side. "Not just movement, not just sound. Something else." "What else?" Daniels asked. The trainer shrugged with a knowing smile. "Whatever's behind the eyes." Rex's early sessions were ordinary enough. Obedience drills, scent work, search techniques. But it wasn't the tasks that caught their attention. It was the way Rex reacted to people. Not criminals, not officers. People. During victim identification drills, while other dogs barked on cue or followed a hand signal, Rex would ignore commands entirely if the scenario didn't feel right. He would sit in front of a trainee, pretending to be calm, but who was secretly shaking inside. He would whine softly at someone whose breathing gave away hidden fear. He would nudge the hand of a quiet teenager acting as a bystander, only for trainers to learn the boy had just suffered a traumatic home situation. Rex didn't follow instructions. He followed emotion. He followed truth. There was a day everyone remembered. The day Rex completed the advanced trauma detection evaluation. In a large indoor training facility, volunteers sat waiting, each instructed to mimic different emotional states. Officer Daniels unclipped Rex's leash. "All right, boy. Find the one who needs you." Most dogs sniffed mechanically, pausing where scent markers were planted. Not Rex. He didn't sniff at all. He walked slowly, silently, gaze sweeping across each face like he was reading a story written in invisible ink. He passed by the actors, pretending to be scared. He paused before a woman told to feign panic, then dismissed her entirely, and then he stopped, in front of a man instructed to remain neutral, to sit calmly, to show nothing. Rex sat before him, tail still, ears lowered. He leaned forward, resting his chin on the man's knee. Trainers exchanged startled glances. The man swallowed hard, then broke. He confessed he'd recently lost a child, something he had been hiding from everyone. But Rex knew somehow. Rex knew. Weeks later, during a real search and rescue mission, a young boy went missing in dense woodland. A storm rolled in, winds violent, branches snapping like bones. Most dogs struggled with shifting scents. Rex did not. He trotted forward confidently, ignoring debris, ignoring dead trails, ignoring commands when they contradicted his instinct. "Rex!" Daniels shouted. Heel! No response. Rex broke through the line. He sprinted to a cluster of fallen branches, and Daniels heard it. A faint whimper. Rex had found the boy, shivering, barely conscious. The dog stood watch the entire time as rescuers worked. It was the moment Daniels understood. Rex doesn't break rules. He breaks patterns. He breaks lies. He breaks through anything that stands between him and the truth. In the months that followed, Rex became known for something rare in police dogs: compassion. Whenever a victim sat alone, Rex would go to them. Sometimes he rested his head on their knee. Sometimes he lay across their feet. Sometimes he simply watched them with those golden brown eyes that seemed to say, "I see you. I feel you. You are not alone." Domestic abuse survivors, missing children, traumatized witnesses. Rex found truth, not in words, but in hearts. His defining moment came during a simulated hostage rescue. Midway through the drill, Rex stopped, then turned sharply, sprinting toward a sealed door no one had marked for the exercise. Daniels forced the door open and froze. Inside sat a teenage volunteer from earlier, hiding, crying silently. He wasn't part of the drill. He had hidden to avoid going home to a troubled family. Rex approached, placing his head against the boy's chest. The instructors were speechless. Rex broke. Formation again. Not for glory, not for praise, but because someone hiding pain needed to be found. Just like Emily did. The child in the courtroom. Small, fragile, trembling, hiding truth behind carefully practiced lies. Rex had seen it before, and that was why, in the courtroom, he reacted before anyone else. Rex wasn't just trained to find victims, he was born to. The courtroom had emptied moments earlier, but the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Thicker, like a blanket woven from grief and unspoken truths. Emily remained curled against Rex, her small fingers tangled deep in his fur, as though he were the only anchor in a world that had spun too fast, too painfully. Judge Hawthorne stood a few feet away, trying not to intrude. He had seen broken children, traumatized victims, terrified witnesses, but never a weight like this pressing against his chest. A child forced into silence, forced into lies, forced into fear so deep it lived in her bones. Rex nudged Emily softly, his breath warm against her cheek. And that simple warmth opened a door inside her mind, a door she never wanted to open again. Darkness spilled through her memory. It began with a smell: damp concrete, old dust, rope fibers tinged with rust. Emily whimpered as the memory swallowed her. She remembered the room was small, windowless, lit only by a dim bulb that swung on a frayed wire. Shadows crawled across the walls like silent monsters. The cold floor under her bare feet, stealing warmth from her skin until she shivered uncontrollably. And the rope. Always the rope. Rough, scratchy, biting into her wrists whenever she moved too fast. She remembered the burn, the sting, the fibers embedding into her skin. She remembered pulling against it, once, twice, dozens of times, until the skin broke but the rope did not. But the worst memory wasn't the rope. It was the voice. Low, angry, always right behind her ear. "Say what we tell you," it hissed, "or your brother pays." Emily's breathing quickened. Her fingers dug into Rex's fur, tight, desperate. She remembered crying, remembered begging, remembered promising she would do anything if they would just leave her brother alone. But promises didn't matter. They dragged her anyway, sometimes by the wrist, sometimes by the hair, sometimes by the arm so tightly she thought the bone might snap. They brought her to a dark room. Her brother was tied there, smaller than she remembered, face streaked with dirt, eyes too tired for a child. His hands were bound behind him, rope wrapped so tight he couldn't feel his fingers, his ankles tied to a metal pole. He tried lifting his head when they shoved her forward. "Emmy?" His voice dry, cracked, barely a sound. Emily sobbed now, the memory clawing at her. The fear had exploded inside her then, so violently she thought she'd faint. One of the men grabbed her chin, forced her to look at him. "You keep your mouth shut unless we tell you," he snarled. "Understand?" She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. Another man leaned closer, whispering venom into her ear. "Say the story correctly in court, or your brother won't see tomorrow." She remembered choking on her own breath, begging them not to hurt him, promising she would do anything. The men laughed. "Good girl." And then she remembered the moment that shattered her. Her brother looked at her, lips trembling. "Emmy, untie me." She scrambled toward him, hands trembling, nails scraping at the knots. I'm trying, she cried, but the rope was too tight, her fingers too small, the darkness too heavy. She pulled until her skin burned, until her wrists bled, until her vision blurred. But the knot would not give. Her brother winced with every tug. "Emmy, stop. It hurts." She froze. Her breath collapsed. Guilt, sharp, crushing, unbearable, slammed into her. She couldn't save him. She couldn't help him. She couldn't even loosen the rope. She remembered screaming, begging, sobbing until her throat ached, and the men only smirked. "Behave," one said, kicking the door shut behind them. She remembered the echo of that door, cold, metallic, final, and her brothers crying in the dark, whispering her name through tears she couldn't wipe away. The memories tore through her like a violent tide. Her shoulders shook, though she had no tears left. Her breath came in thin, ragged strips. She couldn't scream, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. But she could hold on. She gripped Rex's fur again, fingers tight, desperate, grounding herself in the warmth of the only creature who asked nothing of her except the truth. Rex pressed his head into her chest, breathing slow, steady, rhythmic, as if calming the storm inside her. Judge Hawthorne watched, seeing everything, the way Emily folded inward, the way her fists clenched, the way her eyes stared into a darkness no child should remember. And in that moment, everyone finally understood. This child didn't just survive. She endured. She endured fear most adults couldn't imagine. She endured threats meant to break her. She endured guilt heavy enough to crush her tiny shoulders. She endured nights in darkness, bound, helpless, terrified for someone she loved. She endured everything, and hid it behind a polite voice and a carefully rehearsed lie. Judge Hawthorne swallowed, eyes stinging. Rex nudged her again, grounding her, bringing her back one trembling breath at a time. She pressed her forehead to Rex's head, whispering a soundless apology. To her brother, and maybe to herself. The courtroom no longer saw a witness. They saw a child who had suffered the unimaginable, and the truth, raw, devastating, settled into every heart present. Emily didn't just escape. She survived something that should have stolen her childhood forever. The moment Judge Hawthorne called recess, the courtroom transformed from a chamber of law into a space of hurried, shaken humanity. Officers moved with gentle urgency, some guiding spectators out the door, others forming a protective ring around Emily as she clung to Rex like a child clings to the last warm thing in winter. But Rex refused to move, not until Emily's sobs had softened, not until she showed the smallest sign of strength, not until her breathing steadied against his fur. Only then, when the judge nodded and Officer Daniels approached slowly, did Rex finally allow himself to stand. But even then, he stayed so close that his shoulder brushed her leg with every step. "Easy, Rex," Daniels murmured. "Let's get her somewhere safe." Safe. The word felt fragile. Two officers escorted Emily into the side hallway, speaking in soft, careful tones. She didn't look up. Her hand stayed buried in Rex's fur, gripping his neck with small, desperate fingers. Rex walked beside her, matching her pace perfectly, refusing to let even an inch separate them. But the moment they crossed the hallway threshold, Rex froze. His muscles stiffened, his ears shot forward, his posture rose like a soldier at attention. Daniels felt the leash tug, not backward this time, but sharply forward, toward the right side of the hall. "Rex," Daniels warned quietly, but the dog didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of Emily, positioning himself protectively, and pulled again. Daniels exhaled. "All right, boy. Show me." Rex led them straight to a door, halfway down the hall. The witness preparation room. The place Emily had been before the testimony began. A chill crawled up Daniels's spine. Pitch. First rate, slow. "Why that room?" He exchanged a look with the detectives. They nodded. Daniels pushed the door open. The room appeared ordinary. Sterile walls, a table, 2 chairs, a half-full bottle of water. But ordinary meant nothing to Rex. The dog surged forward, nose low, sniffing with sharp intensity. Not curiosity, not stress, purpose. He circled once, twice, pausing near the chair Emily had sat in. Daniels knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" Rex answered with no bark, just a deep, low rumble from his chest, the same sound he made when danger hid beneath human lies. The detectives stepped closer. "What's he picking up?" one whispered. Daniels inhaled. Emily's fear still hung in the air, sharp, metallic. But beneath it, something else, something foreign. Something that didn't belong. Rex followed the scent. His nose brushed the back of the chair, then the underside of the table, then the floor near the left leg. He stopped. The room held its breath. Rex lowered his head, sniffed again, then let out a short, urgent bark. Daniels crouched next to him. "What is it? What do you smell?" Rex pawed lightly at the chair leg. Once, twice, then whipped his head toward the wall behind it. "Move the chair," a detective ordered. They moved it. Rex lunged forward, not violently, but with absolute certainty. His nose pressed to the baseboard. He inhaled deeply, and then he growled. Not a warning growl, but a truth-cutting growl. Daniel's pulse surged. "There's something here." He ran his fingers along the baseboard. Nothing. Rex pawed again. Harder. That was enough. A detective wedged a tool under the trim and pried upward. The board came loose. Dust fell. And then, a tiny black device rolled onto the floor. A recorder. Small. Sophisticated. Hidden. Daniels's blood iced over. "Oh my God," a detective breathed. Another officer picked it up with gloves. "Check if it's active." A tiny red light blinked. It was active. The entire time Emily was in the room. The seventh climax hit like silent thunder. "They were monitoring her," Daniels whispered. "They were feeding her instructions. Or threatening her." Rex nudged the recorder, letting out a low whimper, the sound he made when a victim's worst fear became real. "We need this to Hawthorne," a detective said, slipping the device into an evidence bag. Rex stepped away from the wall, returning to Emily, who had stood silently in the doorway the entire time, eyes wide, trembling. They told me not to say anything," she whispered. "They said they'd hurt my brother if I didn't." Her knees buckled. Rex caught her, pressing his body against her legs, letting her collapse into him like he was the only safe place she had left. Daniels touched her shoulder gently. "Emily, we believe you now, all of it." She nodded weakly, burying her face in Rex's fur. And as the officers and detectives stood around her, a circle of anger, guilt, and fierce protectiveness, the truth settled over them like a heavy, righteous storm. Rex had uncovered what no human had: a tiny hidden device, a silent threat, a trail of fear woven into the room, evidence that would bring the entire lie crashing down. The courtroom doors opened with a heavy groan, and a hush swept across the chamber. People filed back in slowly. Officers, clerks, the prosecutor, the defense team. Each one carrying the weight of what had just been discovered in the witness preparation room. Judge Hawthorne stood at the bench, his expression carved from stone. He no longer looked merely judicial. He looked furious, protective, dangerous, in the way only a man sworn to defend truth can be. Emily entered last. She walked slowly, her tiny frame stiff with fear, eyes fixed on the floor, breathing shallow and uneven. But Rex stayed pressed against her side with every step, matching her movements like a shadow with a heartbeat. Every officer in the room straightened the moment they saw her. Everyone knew now. Everyone understood. She no longer walked in as a witness. She walked in as a child who had been wronged. The suspect, the man accused in the original case, rose from his seat with a calculated ease. He straightened his tie, then glanced at Emily with a thin, razor-edged smile. Rex felt it. His ears flattened, his muscles tensed. A low rumble rose deep inside his chest. Daniels tightened the leash. "Easy, Rex. Easy." Judge Hawthorne raised his gavel, but didn't strike it. "Bring the defendant forward." Officers flanked the man, escorting him toward the bench. He didn't resist. He didn't look afraid. If anything, he looked amused. Emily saw him and froze. Her knees buckled, her palm pressing into Rex's back for support, her trembling visible even from the back of the courtroom. Judge Hawthorne spoke gently. "Emily, I need you to look at this man. Is he the one who—" Before he could finish, the suspect laughed. "Times 600 mots." A soft chuckle, but it sliced the room like a knife. Emily recoiled, pressing herself into Rex's side, breath shattering into rapid, shallow bursts. Rex moved, not to attack, not to lunge, but to protect, placing himself between Emily and the man, body low, instincts coiled. The judge's jaw tightened. "Mr. Kane," he said coldly, "you heard her testimony. You heard her break. Are you telling me you have nothing to say?" Kane smirked. "I didn't force anyone. Kids lie. It's what they do." Officers went rigid. The prosecutor's fists clenched. Hawthorne's voice dropped, dark and dangerous. "We found a recording device in the preparation room." Kane's eyebrow twitched. Just slightly. A crack, a tell, but he covered it with another smirk. "Doesn't mean it was mine." Emily's breath hitched sharply. Rex turned his head toward her, sensing her panic rise like a wave. "Emily," the judge said softly, "child, is this the man who threatened you?" She trembled, shoulders shaking, fingers twitching at her sides. Rex pressed against her leg. Warm, steady, grounding. She laid her hand on his head, drawing courage from the one soul who would never, ever lie to her. The courtroom fell breathlessly still. Then, slowly, painfully, Emily lifted her head. Her voice wavered, her lips trembled, but her eyes hardened with courage. "Yes," she whispered. The word echoed. Kane rolled his eyes. "She's confused." Emily stepped forward. "No." Her voice cracked, but grew. "You lied." The room froze. Kane's smirk slipped. Emily swallowed, tears glistening, but she held them back. "You lied," she repeated, louder now, shaking, rising like a flame. "And you made me lie too." Eighth climax. Her truth cracked through the courtroom like thunder finally finding the sky. Kane's smile vanished. He took one step toward her, and Rex erupted. A thunderous, feral snarl tore through the air, loud, sharp, protective. Rex lunged forward, not at Kane but to block, shoving himself between Emily and danger with explosive precision. Kane stumbled backward in shock. "Get back!" Daniel shouted, yanking the leash taut. Though Rex didn't try to break free. He stood like a shield forged from muscle and instinct, teeth bared in warning. "Enough!" Judge Hawthorne roared. But the courtroom was already in chaos. Officers surged forward. "Hands behind your back! You threatened a minor! Don't move!" Kane fought, but 3 officers forced him to the floor. Emily flinched at the sound, but Rex nudged her gently, guiding her a step away. Hawthorne slammed his gavel, once, twice, 3 times. "Order!" But order didn't return, not completely, because truth, once freed, makes a different kind of noise. A mother in the gallery cried. The stenographer wiped her eyes. 2 officers bowed their heads in shame. Emily trembled, but she stood. Rex remained beside her, tail stiff, stance protective. And justice, for the first time that day, finally breathed. The courtroom felt different when everyone returned. Not colder, not heavier, just quieter. A sacred kind of quiet. The stillness after a storm, when broken things lie exposed, and healing finally has enough space to breathe. Emily walked in slowly, guided by an officer who kept a respectful distance. She wasn't trembling the way she had before, not violently, but her steps were small, cautious, like each one demanded more strength than her tiny frame should have held. Rex walked beside her, not in front, not behind. Beside her. His shoulder brushed her hand. His stride matched hers. his presence a silent vow. I'm here. I'm not leaving. For the first time since the trial began, the whole courtroom stilled. Not because of procedure, but because they were watching a child reclaim something she never should have lost. Her voice, her truth, her place in the world. She reached the witness stand, and this time, she didn't curl inward. She didn't hide behind her hair. She didn't wring her hands. Instead, she lifted her chin, just barely, but enough. Judge Hawthorne noticed. His stern features softened. "Emily," he said gently, "do you feel ready to speak?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached down and brushed her fingers over Rex's head. He nudged her hand, soft, steady, encouraging. Only then did she nod. The judge exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Very well," he murmured. "The court will hear your statement." The room seemed to fade. No shifting papers, no hushed whispers, no rustling coats. Just a child, a dog, and the fragile flame of truth finally allowed to burn. Emily inhaled shakily, her lips parted. "My name is Emily," she began, small but steady, so different from the rehearsed voice she'd been forced to use before. "And I'm not just a witness." Her eyes shimmered. "I'm someone who was hurt." No one moved. No one blinked. Not even Rex. "I didn't want to lie," she whispered. I tried. I tried so hard not to. But her voice cracked. They said if I didn't say what they told me, they would hurt my brother." Soft gasps rippled across the room. Emily swallowed, fingers tightening on Rex's collar. "They tied me up in a dark place. I could hear my brother crying. I tried to help him. I tried so hard." Tears blurred her vision. "But I couldn't untie him. I wanted to save him. I really did." Her voice broke. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Heavy tears filled with guilt far too big for a child to carry. Rex leaned into her, laying his head on her knee. Her hand found the fur between his ears, instinctively, gratefully. "And when I came here," Emily whispered, "I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell the truth so bad, but I was scared. I didn't want them to hurt my brother again." Her breath shook. "But Rex," she turned to the dog beside her. "Rex knew something was wrong. Even when I didn't say anything, he knew." The courtroom shifted. Even the air seemed to tremble. "He helped me," she murmured. "He kept coming closer and closer. He didn't let me hide anymore. And when he growled," a soft sob escaped. "It was like he was saying, 'I know you're scared, but I won't let them hurt you again.'" Her tears fell harder. "He stayed with me when I cried. He didn't move. He didn't leave me to." Tia, the stenographer, wiped her eyes, fingers trembling over the keys. Emily breathed in, shaky and brave. "And that's when I understood." Her voice quivered. She looked at Rex, truly looked at him. He wasn't just a dog in the courtroom. He was the only one who heard what I couldn't say out loud. A collective ache spread, deep, wide, human. This was the ninth climax, the heart-shattering truth blooming in the center of the courtroom. Emily wiped her cheek. "And I want to say thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Rex, for helping me tell the truth, for helping the judge see me." Her tiny fingers stroked his head again. "And thank you for keeping me safe." A single tear rolled down Rex's fur where her hand rested. Dogs don't cry. Everyone knew that. But in that moment, the whole courtroom imagined he did. Judge Hawthorne cleared his throat. When he spoke, it wasn't the voice of a judge. It was the voice of a father, a protector, a man shaken to his core. "Emily, look at me." She lifted her head slowly. "You are safe now," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Truly, completely, absolutely safe." The words cracked something open in her chest. Not fear, not grief, but the crushing weight she had been forced to carry alone. New tears spilled, not sharp, not suffocating, but tears of release. Tears of truth. Tears of a child who finally heard the words she deserved from the beginning. "You're safe now." The courtroom, once cold and sterile, now felt like a sanctuary. Officers stood taller. The prosecutor bowed his head. Even the defense attorney sat silent, shaken by the truth. Rex nudged Emily's chin. She smiled, a tiny, broken, beautiful smile, and whispered something only he could hear. "I believe him, because I believe you." And for the first time since the nightmare began, her world, small, shattered, fragile, began to stitch itself slowly, gently, back together. The courthouse hallway was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. It wasn't peaceful or empty. It was the kind of quiet that follows something earth-shaking, a silence that feels almost sacred. Dust floated lazily in the afternoon light, catching the sun in slow, shimmering spirals. Footsteps echoed softly on the marble floors as officers, clerks, and bystanders moved with an unspoken gentleness, as if afraid to disturb the fragile air around them. And in the center of that silence stood a little girl, and the dog who had saved her. Emily kept her hands curled at her stomach, her fingers still trembling slightly, even though the tears had stopped. Her brother stood beside her, thin, fragile, pressed protectively against her side. He wasn't much bigger than she was, but he clung to her like someone afraid she might vanish if he blinked too long. On her other side sat Rex, silent, sturdy, unmoving, a wall of fur, muscle, and unshakable devotion. He hadn't left her once since the moment she broke down in court. Even now, Rex kept his eyes locked on her, reading every twitch, every breath, every unspoken fear. He was a dog. But at the same time, he wasn't. He was something more. Loyalty shaped into muscle, courage shaped into heart, a protector shaped into silence. And today, everyone knew it. From the far end of the hallway, Commander Holt approached, head of the K-9 division, a man not easily shaken. Decades of service had carved lines across his face, and he walked with the weight of a lifetime of responsibility. But today, his steps were slower, not hesitant, not weak, reverent. Behind him, a dozen officers formed a semicircle, quiet, waiting, watching. In Holt's hands, he carried a velvet box, dark blue, smooth, heavy with significance. Emily recognized the importance of it instantly, not from experience, but from instinct. Holt stopped in front of Rex. He glanced at Emily, his stern features softening. Then he crouched in front of the German shepherd. "Rex," he said quietly, gravel in his voice cracking. "Front and center, boy." Rex rose immediately, not like an obedient dog following orders, but like a soldier answering a call. His stance straightened, his ears lifted, his head tilted slightly in acknowledgement. Holt's voice softened. "You've done something today that goes beyond training, beyond duty, beyond anything we could have expected of a K-9. Emily squeezed her brother's hand. Holt continued. "You didn't just protect an officer, or track a fugitive, or rescue a civilian." His voice fell into a hush. "You protected a child. And you fought for the truth when the rest of us were blind to it." Rex blinked, steady as stone. Daniels stepped forward, opening the velvet box. Inside lay a silver badge, shaped like a shield, edges beveled. A German shepherd mid-stride engraved at the center. At the bottom, in hand-etched letters, "For courage beyond duty." Daniel's voice cracked. "Buddy, you earned this more than any dog I've ever trained." He clipped the badge gently to Rex's harness. The metal caught the afternoon sun, gleaming like armor, gleaming like honor, gleaming like truth. Emily exhaled a trembling breath, tears pooling in her lashes, not from fear, but from something warmer: gratitude, hope, love. Rex turned toward her, as if asking, "Do you see? It was all for you." Emily stepped closer, her breaths thin and uneven. She placed her palm gently over Rex's new badge. Her faint scar pressed against the cool silver. Rex's heartbeat pulsed beneath it, warm, steady, grounding her. Then she whispered, voice cracking under the weight of truth, "You didn't just save my brother." Rex's ears twitched. Emily inhaled sharply. "You saved me too." The officers froze, breath caught, eyes stinging. Commander Holt turned away, regaining composure. Rex leaned forward, placing his forehead on Emily's shoulder, a gesture soft, deliberate, full of love, as if saying, "I would do it again." Emily wrapped both arms around him, sobbing silently, releasing the last remnants of fear she had carried for so long. Her brother joined the embrace, burying himself in Rex's fur. Rex stood firm, patient, strong, a living pillar for two children who desperately needed one. Judge Hawthorne emerged from the courtroom then. His voice was gentle. "Emily, child, the danger is gone. You're safe now. Truly." This time Emily believed him. Time 1200 almost. The officers formed a path from the hallway to the great double doors. Not planned, not rehearsed, but offered in quiet, overwhelming respect. Emily took her brother's hand. Rex nudged her elbow gently. And together, the three of them walked. The officers watched silently. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others lowered their heads. A few let quiet tears fall. Their footsteps echoed softly, steady, rhythmic, as Rex's new badge glinted like a small star. Finally, they reached the doors. Two officers pushed the heavy panels open. Sunlight poured in, flooding the hallway in golden brilliance. Emily blinked into the warmth. For the first time in so long, she felt it. Freedom. Rex stepped beside her, head high, tail steady, badge shining like a beacon. Three figures, three survivors, three souls bound together by truth and courage. They descended the courthouse steps. The sunlight enveloped them. And for the first time, the shadows of the past began to fall away. Rex led them forward, the silent hero whose heart never lies. And behind them, the courthouse doors closed softly, sealing away the echoes of what had been, as they walked into a new beginning. Some stories stay with us, not because of the twists, but because of the hearts inside them. And this one reminds us why German Shepherds are not just working dogs, but protectors, partners, family. Their loyalty runs deeper than instinct, something almost spiritual, something you can feel in the quiet moments when a dog leans against your leg and somehow makes the world less heavy. If you have a dog of your own, you already know how powerful that bond is. And if you ever want to deepen that connection, to understand them better, there's a resource I've been exploring lately. Nothing pushy, nothing fancy, just something that might help. No pressure at all. Think of it as a simple recommendation from one dog lover to another. And wherever you are tonight, give your dog an extra pat. They really do notice.